Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to the Mentor Nation podcast. It's your host, John Abbas here, and today I have an incredible guest who has just an amazing story of entrepreneurship. By the age of 18, Cameron Herold already had 14 different businesses that he had started. By age 20, he owned a painting franchise with 12 employees. In his 20s and 30s, he helped turn 3 small companies into global powerhouse brands. Now, if you're in the United States, you've probably heard of at least 2 of these companies. 1-800-GOT-JUNK and Gerber Collision. And it's crazy because I just want you to think about this for a second. Like 1-800-GOT-JUNK. How in the heck do you turn a company that hauls junk away? Probably the most unsexy idea of a company ever. But how do you turn that into a sexy brand that does over $100 million a year? Like, it blows my mind and it's crazy. Cameron was also coaching hundreds of entrepreneurs during this time, including, you may have heard of Kimball Musk, who is the brother of none other than Elon Musk. Since then, Cameron has written 5 best-selling books, he's launched an award-winning podcast, and he's formed the largest mastermind of its kind called the COO Alliance, which focuses strictly on helping the second-in-command of large companies with processes and support group. Now, originally, I just wanted to have Cameron share his story and his mindsets around building companies from scratch. But after discovering and listening to his TED Talk, I knew that there was a far more important topic to talk about. His TED Talk was around grooming your children for entrepreneurship, a really important topic in my opinion. With most schools teaching children to become great employees, Cameron shares some invaluable insights such as how to tell if your kids have entrepreneurial qualities early on, how to develop those qualities, and just how to help your kids become what they want to be and not what you want them to be. This is a great interview, and if you know anyone with kids, please share this episode with them because, look, as a father of 3 girls myself, I can tell you honestly that I fell into the trap of trying to mold my kids into what I thought they should do versus paying attention to their strengths and passions and trying to develop those. Without further ado, guys, enjoy the episode. Here's Cameron. All right, Cameron, thank you so much for being on the Mentor Nation podcast. It is a pleasure to have you.
Hey, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So I'm excited to get into our topic, and I know the audience is going to love this episode because it's all about teaching and raising kids and grooming them to be entrepreneurs, which is a topic that I know everybody's going to be excited about. But before we get into that, I have to have you share a little bit about your story because you have a really interesting entrepreneurial story dating back to when you were a little kid. You helped grow a company that we all know, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But can you just share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey before we get into the interview?
Sure. And just to be clear for everybody as well, the TED Talk that we're going to be talking about that I did 10 years ago was raising entrepreneurial kids. And it's not so much to raise all kids as entrepreneurs, but to raise all kids to be entrepreneurial. We can get into the difference between those two things because I think it's important that people realize that I think only 3% of the population should ever be an entrepreneur, but I definitely think more people should be entrepreneurial versus waiting for the handouts.
I love that. Thank you for that clarification, by the way.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I think the original title of the talk was raising kids to be entrepreneurs instead of lawyers, and they cut out the instead of lawyers part.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my story begins, I guess, my father decided to raise his 3 kids, my brother and my sister and I, all to be entrepreneurial. I think he actually probably did push more for all of us to actually be entrepreneurs. And he really taught us at a very early age that having a job was a bad idea, having a job was a bad deal. He took me to the golf course one day and showed me all the people walking into the golf club at 12 o'clock. And he said, that guy owns a car dealership, and she owns a clothing store, and he owns an accounting firm, and he owns this company. And then we went and played golf for 4 hours, and we came back at 5 o'clock, and we were sitting on the balcony, and I'm eating my French fries and gravy and drinking my cherry Coke, and he's sipping away on his whatever. And he showed me everybody walking in at 5 o'clock, and he said, that guy's a teacher, and he works for the mine, and that guy works for the such and such a company, and that guy works at the car dealership. He said, you see the difference between who plays golf at 12 o'clock and who plays golf at 5 o'clock? And I said, yeah, the people that own their own company get to play golf during the day, and everybody else has to play at the end of the day. And he said, people that run their own company control their time. And he said, the number one benefit of being an entrepreneur, of working for yourself, is you control all of your own time. You can do what you want when you want, and the money is always secondary to that. And I thought that was a really powerful lesson for me as an entrepreneurial kid and as an adult, was to recognize that I could control my time.
I love that. Now, you had a lot of businesses by the time you were 14, 15, correct?
Yeah. So because he kind of kept showing us these little entrepreneurial things and would cheer us on to do them, I did probably 15 or 16 different little entrepreneurial ventures by the time I was 18 years old. And I listed out a bunch of them on my talk. It's still on the main TED.com website. And I talked about kind of the lessons that I learned from each little business venture. And I think that was the important thing my father taught us, and my mom. Both of their parents were entrepreneurs as well. They didn't get involved in running the business for us. They let us learn by doing it ourselves. And one of my biggest pet peeves nowadays is, I see these parents that are out running a lemonade stand and their kid happens to be standing with them. It's kind of how I feel. It's like, the mom spent all day making this beautiful lemonade stand and putting the signs together. And meanwhile, the kid didn't learn a thing. And my parents made us make our own sign, made us haul the table out, made us stand there by ourselves. We'd come back in and go, I'm not selling anything. And they would talk to us about it. Then we'd go back out and try their tips. But they kept making the suggestions from a distance and letting us try and fail and then try and succeed. And that's where the lessons kicked in. And I think far too often the parents are micromanaging and helicopter parenting the kids' little businesses, that the kids don't learn anything at all. So that was my growing up, was doing all these little entrepreneurial ventures and really growing from those. And I could still, rattle off probably 15 of them off the top of my head and give you one or two specific business lessons from each of them as well.
Yes. And I can't wait to get into that. Actually, I can't wait to dive into the topic, but I have to know one thing before we dive into that. And that's just like the story behind 1-800-GOT-JUNK, because you came on board, super small company. You grew it into, over $100 million a year, a company that everybody knows. But it's just like, how in the world did you take an industry that was that unsexy and turn it into a powerhouse, like household name? Like was it one big thing, or was it a bunch of little things? Like, could you just share that really quickly, please?
Yeah, it's a few things. And what's interesting, that was the third brand, the third company that I'd taken a very unsexy, boring, fragmented industry and really professionalized it and built the largest company in. So the first company was College Pro Painters, and I ended up working on the senior leadership team at College Pro. I opened up 120 of their franchises over 4 years. I ran a franchise. I worked in 2 countries with them and helped build a 1,200 person company one summer for them. So that was the first one. The second time I did it was a chain of auto body collision repair shops, which is now called Gerber Auto Collision in the US and Boyd Auto Body in Canada. So 1-800-GOT-JUNK was the third company that I did it with. So because I did it before, I really understood the leverage points to really go after. So my first week or two at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I came into the company. I was the 14th employee at the head office. When I left 6.5 years later, we had 3,100 employees system-wide. The first 3 things that I did was I got the company to raise their prices by about 40%. And I remember everyone at the head office thinking I was crazy because they were charging $238 and $258 a full load, $318 a full load. I took them to $438 or $458 a full load within a week. Right off. And they said, nobody's going to use us. And I said, it doesn't matter, because the people that are using us now, nobody's making money off of. So the people that do use us, we're going to be able to have a better brand and better marketing and better employees, and we can all make money at it. So we did it. We pushed really hard. We were way more expensive than everybody else. Within about a year, everyone else followed suit and started charging what we were charging. But we wanted to position ourselves as the FedEx of junk removal or the Starbucks of junk removal. The second thing that I did was I wanted to build the company into a little bit more than a business, a little bit less than a religion, and kind of build it into that zone of a cult. And that was a lesson I'd learned at College Pro Painters, was when you become a cult, people will do anything to come and work for you, and you can attract the best employees, which help you grow the brand. So, during my tenure there, we actually had Z and one of our employees both get permanent tattoos of our company logo. So we really did hit that cult-like status. We ranked as the number 2 company in all of Canada to work for. And then the third thing that I did was about leveraging free PR. And in fact, I just actually wrote a book called Free PR, where I gave away all the secrets of how we did it. But I'd been doing it for 15 years at that point. And it was all around how to generate free publicity about the company in newspaper, magazines, radio, TV, and now with podcasters and e-zines, et cetera. We ended up with 5,200 stories about our company over a period of 6.5 years, including being on Oprah. We were in the Chicago Tribune, Dallas Morning News, New York Times, Forbes magazine, all over the place. So the press, when you get covered in the press, and then you can lever it up and make sure people see it, is what adds the social proof and that credibility that your customers and your employees and potential employees all buy into. So those were the 3 main things that I did to really push the company. And then lastly, I guess it was all about people. Like, we really, really pushed to bring in fantastic employees and also turn the company into a world-class brand.
Man, that is just, it's such an incredible story. And that is a whole other podcast interview right there. I mean, Gerber Collision, it's a household name here in the United States. There's like 3 within.
We're about a $900 million company now, Gerber. And then College Pro went on to become the largest house painting company in the world as well.
That's incredible. And we almost had that talk on this podcast. And so I want the audience to know. So I was doing research, obviously, just your story blew me away. And I was so excited just to talk about what a unique brand that you've built, focusing on, the CEO, the COO, the second in command. And I was going down that rabbit hole. I get on YouTube. I last minute watch a TED Talk, which just blew my mind. And that's just, I took so much notes, and I was so excited that I just decided to shift this interview because, I know my audience pretty well in the podcast. And here's what I know, especially a lot of my friends, my personal friends that are also parents. You have a lot of parents out there. They're just trying to do the best that they can. And we all have pretty much the same mindset. We talk about this all the time. And our mindset is we just want our kids to have a better life than we had. And the crazy thing is a lot of us, we really don't know what that means. We don't have a plan for that. We don't have a strategy for that. It's like this sentence that's in our head. And really, more than anything, I just would like to take a few minutes, Cameron, and just, if you could take that phrase and just bring it to life with a strategy. And now you already said, 3% of people entrepreneurs, but the big thing for me is I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a kid. Thousands and thousands of kids are just being put on medication because they're labeled ADHD. I just want to have you speak a little bit about that and just raising kids and bringing the entrepreneurial spirit out of them and some of the strategies that you do.
Yeah. So, there's some data points related to, first off, bipolar disorder, which is, manic depression. The data on that is approximately 3% of the US population has bipolar, and approximately 3% of the population are entrepreneurs. What's really interesting is there's a very high correlation between entrepreneurs and bipolar disorder, to the point that the medical community has called bipolar disorder the CEO disease. Many, many, many entrepreneurs. Now, what's interesting about bipolar is it's a disease if you're a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer or an accountant,
right?
But it's not a disease when you're an entrepreneur. The mania, the excitement, the energy, the starting things quickly, that optimism is why people follow us. Steve Jobs was hypomanic. Richard Branson is bipolar. Ted Turner is bipolar. Henry Ford was bipolar. 2 of the founders of Netscape were bipolar. Like, the list goes on and on. So in many cases, it's not a disorder at all. It's just what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. And to medicate that actually means you're taking away their superpower. The second part is attention deficit disorder. So attention deficit disorder, again, is a disorder if you want to be an accountant or someone who focuses on details or someone who's in a very precise job.
Right.
But that's not what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship, you need to see everything. You need to be aware of the customer, the market, the supplier, the economy, the time, your employees, the culture. You need to actually be able to see everything. So it's more attention disbursement, which is a superpower for an entrepreneur. most entrepreneurial CEOs are ADD. I have 17 of the 18 signs of attention deficit disorder, and I'm on the spectrum for bipolar disorder. I have 10 of the 11 traits for bipolar. So according to the medical community and the school system, I'm a disaster. But the reality is, if I medicated myself, I would take away my traits. So what you need to do is understand yourself and not listen to the people that are saying you have a problem. I don't want to be like a teacher. I've never seen a single teacher who's inspiring enough to start their own company and have people quit their jobs and join them. I've never seen an engineer or an accountant very often who can go out and, get venture capitalists to invest in their crazy harebrained idea. So you need to be outside of the box. But when we're constantly being told to stay in the box, that's a disease. So what I like doing in kids is identifying the kids that have entrepreneurial traits and saying, okay, those 3% of the kids shouldn't be medicated. Right. We should put them into a system that facilitates that and allow them to run businesses at school, stop shutting them down. Maybe create an area where they can run their little businesses and have their shops and pay the school rent, but don't keep shutting these kids down from running their businesses on the property. If they want to buy, they want to buy snacks and sell it on the school property, let them do it. If they want to get clothing logoed and sell it at school, let them do it. It's so weird that we would ever teach entrepreneurship but shut these kids down from their entrepreneurial ventures.
Man, that's so true. Like, so when are you running for Congress? No,
well, it's interesting. So in 1993, I recruited Kimball Musk, who's Elon's brother, to come and work for me at College Pro Painters. And I remember talking to him the year after when his cousin was working for me, who built Solar City, and they were both franchisees of mine at College Pro Painters. And Kimball said to me that at the commerce program that he was in the number one or one of the number one programs in Canada for business school. He was at Queen's University, which would kind of like be the Cornell or the Harvard or Yale. Like it would be one of those schools.
Right.
He was in their business program. He said the professor on day one said to the class of 300, "You're being groomed to be middle managers at corporations." And Kimball said he almost threw up in class. He was just like, "Are you kidding? Like, get me out of here." The reality was, and now what we're trying to do is have professors teach entrepreneurship, which is ludicrous. Right. None of these professors could ever run a company to save their lives. So I think we have to be very, very careful with diagnosing people who have just because they're not like anybody else. That would be like saying redheads are a disease and we should get their hair permanently changed color.
That's true. So how do you bridge that gap? Let's just pretend this is a big question.
The gap's actually been bridged in the last 20 years. See, when I grew up, it was very different. I was a kid. Right. When I was 10 years old was 1975. So through the 70s and 80s, when I was a kid running a business, being an entrepreneur was evil. You were vilified. You were greedy. You were capitalist. You were profit-centric. Now, since 1998, really the rise of the first dot-com era in 97 through 2000, entrepreneurship became cool. And then when the crash happened, everyone got nervous. But then when the build-up again from 2002 through 2008, entrepreneurship became super cool again. Now everybody wants to be Zuckerberg. So
that's right.
It's not as a problem now bridging that gap because entrepreneurship is now cool and the entrepreneurial traits are getting more recognized.
I love that. Now, you mentioned a book I think it was in your TED Talk, a book that I absolutely loved, Atlas Shrugged, my favorite book of all time. And that book celebrates entrepreneurship. That book inspired me so much when I was in the Navy. I read that and it just, like I reread it. And I read it approximately once a year. It's just like, I can't believe that book was written so long ago.
Crazy, right? Yeah.
Insane. So that
was really the first book where the entrepreneur or the capitalist was a hero.
Absolutely.
That was very, very almost like it was almost dystopian back then to even think of the entrepreneur as the hero. But nowadays, entrepreneurs are looked at as the hero. So it's a little different now. I think what we have to be careful with now is too many parents want their kids to be entrepreneurs when Bobby and Sally don't have the entrepreneurial traits at all. Just let them go have great jobs.
Right.
There's a lot of kids out there that should not be entrepreneurs, right? They don't have the leadership. They don't have that ADD to be noticing everything. They don't have that drive. They don't have that mania that has people following them. They're not problem solvers. They don't see the opportunity and capitalize on it. Those are all very strong entrepreneurial traits. You can teach it, but I think when you have the DNA, those are the kids we really want to ramp up, right? Find the kids that maybe come from low-income families or come from families where you've got a teacher and a doctor as parents, but the kid is hardwired to be an entrepreneur. Let's let that kid run away from the medicine and towards entrepreneurship.
I love that. What do you do if you have one kid that has all of those traits and another that doesn't at all? Do you just nurture both?
I like training the kids to be entrepreneurial, but I would nurture the one kid to actually be an entrepreneur.
Gotcha.
So being entrepreneurial means, spotting opportunities, seeing the glasses half full, finding ways to make money and have side hustles and gigs, but that can be a freelancer. Freelancers,
Right.
people are talking about, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're a freelancer, and that's okay. You're responsible for your own money and for finding your own clients. But an entrepreneur is someone who creates a business that has multiple employees that are throwing off revenue and free time for them. A freelancer is doing all the work, and that's okay. I love freelancers, and I love kids who should be a freelancer versus going and working for some shitty company doing the job. If my kid wants to be a copywriter, I'd rather see them be a freelancing copywriter,
Right.
to be able to live all over the world and have multiple clients and do stuff. So teach them to be entrepreneurial, but don't necessarily push them into opening their own company.
I love that. That's a big mistake that I see a lot of people make. Even myself with my kids, is instead of harnessing the traits that they have, it's just like, my kids need to be entrepreneurs because I never want them to work for somebody. I really, really appreciate you sharing that. Now, some of the strategies that you talked about in your TED Talk were really cool. And I was just wondering if you could share a few of those, just your mindset around allowances and how you teach your kids to save. Can you speak on a couple of those things?
Sure. So an allowance is really interesting. An allowance is kind of a training program to have a regular wage. So you're going to give the kid, let's say you're going to give them $5 a week to do chores around the house. So they get the same wage every week, $5. They have the same amount of tasks every week. You probably have to nag them and hold them accountable to do the tasks, and then you give them the money anyway. And they're going to do the least amount of effort to get that money. Great. So you're training your kids to have a job. What I like doing is putting up a list of chores and letting my kids know that they can spot other opportunities around the house as well. And they have their basic chores, like clean the kitchen, it's your time, that nobody gets paid for. That's called being a human in the house. But if there's other chores around the place, like sweeping up the property or cutting the grass or, washing the car or blah, 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 going to pick up the dry cleaning, those are chores that they can spot, that they can do, that they can negotiate with you on what you think is fair. So you're now teaching them how to negotiate. They're spotting an opportunity. They're learning how to sell you on it. They're capitalizing on it. Those are things I really like.
Got it. I love that. Now, do you believe in going to business school, or would you rather them just save their time and start a business? If they have the qualities young enough, you've been bringing it out of them. What are your thoughts on?
I think university in the United States is an extraordinary waste of money. I'll give you an example. So what would the normal university tuition be in the US?
Probably depending, but yeah, like anywhere from 30 to 50,000 a year.
So in Canada, my son goes to the University of Victoria, and it's $5,600 Canadian, which is $4,200 US is tuition. His room and board in residence for the first year was about $4,500 total. All in US dollars, he's about, let's call it $9,000, including books. It's worthwhile to go to university when, after 4 years, your total expenses are $36,000. But
wow.
The economics don't work. And most parents are either idiots or lazy, or they've forgotten how to talk to their friends about it. But when you do the math, let's say a kid goes to university and has $30,000 a year in debt. So they're going to graduate university after 4 years with $120,000 in debt. They've probably not worked during those 4 years because they're trying to get through university. So they've gone 4 years without earning a penny. Now they have to go get a job, and they're going to take all of their profit after living expenses and put all of that profit from their job and put it into paying off the university, which is going to take them about 7 years. So they're going to actually, in after-tax dollars, take 7 years to pay off the $120,000. It's really going to be like 11 or 12 years of them going completely sideways without ever having saved a penny just so they have a degree. That doesn't make any sense. And most of these kids aren't going into business school. They're doing like an arts degree with a psychology background. So no, I don't think for most kids, university makes any economic sense whatsoever. I would rather see kids go and apprentice, go and get a job at any company for whatever the company is willing to pay them, including minimum wage, work for 4 different great companies doing stuff, and ask to be able to sit in on management meetings once a week and just sit in the back of the classroom back of the room and take notes. But the problem is most parents don't know how to turn to their friends and say, Bobby's apprenticing, and they're embarrassed to say he's not going to the university of wherever. And
I agree with you 100%. It's terrible. Like that's the reality. And that's, what you see every single day. Now, having grown several companies to, first in class, best in class, are there like specific qualities, like if you had to rate like the top 1 to 3 things that you think are the most important skills, is it whether it's negotiation, understanding accounting and numbers, being able to deal with people, like what were some of the most important traits that you developed over time that helped you scale your brands?
Leadership, attainment, tenacity would have been the 3. Leadership, to be able to lead myself and lead others and lead suppliers and be able to recruit people.
Mm-hmm.
The goal orientation and attainment, to be able to drive and drive and drive and drive and to build something and to build something bigger. Like 1-800 Got Junk, we had six consecutive years of 100% revenue growth, 6 years in a row. We went from 2 million to 106 million in 6 years. That's all because of goals, right? And driving towards goals. And then the third is tenacity. It's just like that dog-like work ethic to get over, under, around obstacles. Like you're not going to give up. I think it was Churchill that said or no, it was it Churchill that said never, ever, ever, ever give up?
I think that was Churchill.
And Coolidge said persistence alone is omnipotent.
Yes, sir.
It's about that tenacity and persistence. I think if you think about what are the business skills, those are the traits I think you need. On the business skills side, sales would be one. Networking would be another, because you don't have to know how. See, here's the other thing. If you're older than 30 years old, you used to have to memorize all the information, because to go find it meant going to a library and using a Dewey Decimal System and tracking down the stack of books and then realizing that one flipping book was already taken out by somebody else.
Right.
And going back and looking for a second book. Nowadays, you don't have to memorize stuff. You just have to be able to look it up. So I think it's the ability to network and problem solve are huge skills today. The network is because it's no longer a how do I do this problem. It's a who problem. It's who can do this. It needs to get done, but not by me. And I think that's a classic shift between the baby boomer and Gen X entrepreneur into the Gen Y entrepreneurs. Gen Y entrepreneurs understand it's a who problem, not a how problem.
I love that. Wasn't it Henry Ford that he was testifying in court and he was getting hammered by the lawyers, and he said something along the lines of, they were just like, well, how come you don't know this? And how come you don't know this? And Henry he looked up at the lawyer and was like, it does not matter what your question is. I could lift my finger and within 10 seconds, I could have someone at my disposal that knows the answer to this question. So I don't need to know this.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is, right? They asked Einstein what his phone number was. He said, I don't know, but I can look it up. So I think that's really an entrepreneurial trait, is recognizing that, right? And I think when you do recognize that you don't have to then be the straight A student. Right. You have to know the straight A students. You have to know how to find answers to problems. You have to know how to problem solve, but you no longer have to be the smartest person in the room.
Makes perfect sense. So let's say that you are a parent or you're talking to a parent that has just been doing it all wrong, right? Like they stumble upon this podcast episode and they have their kids, whatever, on medication because they're worried and concerned that they can't pay attention in class. They've just been doing it all wrong, fucking it all up, but they want to make it.
School's really fucking boring. So why would anybody want to pay attention in school? It's really boring.
That's absolutely, I agree with you. And so let's say they wanted to make that change right away and just start to do better. What would be like the 1 or 2 things that you would do right away to start pivoting in the right direction as a parent?
Wow. I guess I would encourage my kids to do activities at school. I would encourage my kids to no longer strive for straight A's, but to be engaged and networked in high school and university so that they're okay with getting a solid B-, but they're engaged in 3 different clubs or activities or sports or fraternities. I would be teaching them to, lead others and go into leadership roles in some of those clubs and organizations so that they come out of university with some leadership traits and skills. And then I would encourage them to, have little side hustles where they earn $50 here and $1,000 there and, but not have to chase down starting it up as a darn company.
Absolutely. And, it's so funny too, because especially with kids, I feel like it's a lot easier to earn money when you're a kid because people really appreciate the fact that you're trying. Like my daughters in Canada, for Christmas, it was so clever. Like I don't even know where they got the idea, but they made these ouch pouches. They bought all of these little pouches at the dollar store and filled them up with, bandages and alcohol wipes. And then they painted them and they created this cute they called it ouch pouches and they sold it. And over Christmas, they made several $100s selling them. And I was just so blown away at just the creativity when you just give kids the opportunity to do that. You encourage it, and everybody appreciates that. Like everybody bought one.
Well, and what's cool about it, if you do it right, is let the kid do it for the amount of time the kid wants to do it, and then let the kid learn from it. Right. But don't worry about whether the business is a 1-month business or a 3-month business or a 4-day business. Like some of my little businesses, happened over the course of a week. Some of them were 3 or 4 weeks during the summer. Some were, 1 day every 3 weeks for a few years. But they were very, one I think I did for 3 days, and I was like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. But every one of those ventures, I learned stuff, and those lessons stuck with me. But I think if you try to turn it into something bigger and make your kid have a website and figure out a brand and a logo, it's like back off, start your own company. Let your kid be entrepreneurial, but don't try to turn them into an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Now, when you were building your brands, did you have any severe missteps, or did you make any really big mistakes that you learned from along the way?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had a franchisee at College Pro Painters who on the very first day of training, the VP said to me, that kid's going to fail. And I was like, no way I can make him successful. And sure enough, 6 weeks in, he was failing, and 12 weeks in, he was failing. And the VP kept looking at me until finally halfway through the summer, the kid had to quit, and the guy's dad was mad at me. I learned then about, interviewing and leadership, and you can't turn an alien into a strong leader. At 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we almost lost the company because Brian and I were too driven and dominant expressives. We weren't listening to a very analytical, amiable head of finance who kept telling us to be careful with spending and that we were overspending and we were expanding too quickly. And we were like, no, we got it. But we didn't understand how to leverage a balance sheet. We didn't understand cash flow. And we, at one point, had to borrow $420,000 from Brian's mom just to meet payroll. So,
wow.
I learned that if you're going to have smart people around you, shut up and listen to them. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that ratio. Tons of lessons on failure, for sure.
That's awesome.
I got mad at 60 employees at a daily huddle one day and, ripped them all apart for wasting time. And I was right to do it, but I destroyed the energy of a company for 6 weeks. I could go on and on lessons from failure.
Absolutely. Now, did you spread these lessons out in your 5 books? Are they in there?
Oh, sure. Oh, for sure. I talked about them on stage. I put them in my books. I think at the end of the day, sometimes the lessons from the edge, sometimes the failure lessons are all really powerful ones that people need to learn from. For me, I'm very good at introspection. So I'm very good at blaming myself for the problem and blaming the external environment second. Mm-hmm. So when something goes wrong, I'm always blaming myself for what I did wrong. I either hired wrong, or I didn't lead people right, or I didn't spend enough time on it, or we weren't focused. I very, very rarely, if never, do I blame an external situation. So the learning comes from that because of blaming myself. I hate failure. I don't want to do it again. It forces me to grow.
I love that. So I know we're almost out of time, Cameron, and I really do appreciate your time. Could you just take a minute and talk really quickly about your 5 books? You've written some incredible books. I cannot wait to read all of them. And I know after listening to this interview, the audience is going to pick them up right away. Could you just share a little bit about each book and what the purpose is?
Sure. So the first book was Double Double, and it's all of the core systems. In fact, Seth Godin gave me the name Double Double. It was originally going to be called Double, how to double revenue and profit in 3 years or less. And he said, well, that's a double and a double. It's a doubling revenue and profit. So Seth Godin wrote the cover testimonial for Double Double. It's all of the systems, and I give you the very specific step-by-step instructions on how to do it. But it's how to grow your revenue, how to grow culture, how to grow people. And we touch on everything from operations, execution, culture, PR, marketing, etc. My second book was called Meetings Suck. And the whole purpose for that was one of my clients who I'd coached from about 40 employees up to 700 was complaining about meetings. And he said, meetings suck. And I walked him through it. And I said, actually, no, you guys suck at running meetings. None of your managers have ever been trained on how to run them. None of your team have ever been trained on how to participate or show up at meetings. So of course meetings suck, but it's because you suck at running meetings. So I wrote that book. 30% of the book is how to run meetings. 30% is how to show up and participate in them as an employee. And the last third of the book is what meetings you need to grow a scalable company. And that's Meetings Suck is a book for every employee at every company to read. The next one that I wrote was Vivid Vision. And that was really kind of taking a concept from Double Double and really expanding on how to create a vision document that describes your company or your life 3 years in the future so that people line up and are aligned with you and conspire to help you make that come true. It's really the core missing system in any high growth company today. And I've got companies using Vivid Visions all over the world now. The fourth book, I co-authored The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs with Hal Elrod. And he and I just looked at the success habits of entrepreneurs and what they do to start their day and to, have a very highly focused day. So we co-authored that together. And then my last book that came out a year ago is called Free PR. And it's all of the systems to generate free publicity and free media coverage for your company.
I cannot wait to read that book. I am excited to read that one. All of them, but especially the free PR book. I can't wait to see some of the gold nuggets in there. So what would be the best way for people listening to connect with you, follow your work, and just really stay connected with your content?
Sure. One way is I have a podcast called the Second in Command podcast that they would all love if they subscribe to that on iTunes and or anywhere they listen to podcasts. So that's one. Secondly is all my books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. And then my main website is thecameronherold.com, and that's HEROLD.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And is there just one takeaway that you would like to leave the audience with? I mean, obviously the topic is grooming children or bringing that trait out of them, entrepreneurship traits. Like, is there any, if you could leave everybody with just 1 to 2 takeaways, what would they be?
Yeah, I think the big one is to not take ourselves so seriously. At the end of the day, none of us are getting out of this alive. This is a death sentence, and we're all going to die. None of us are going to get out of this thing alive. This is just what we're doing to make money. So if we can have fun along the way and hold hands with each other and enjoy the journey a little bit and laugh along the way, it's going to be enjoyable for everybody, including ourselves. That again, this is just what we're doing to make money. But I think so often people take ourselves so seriously that we forget the journey we're on.
I love that. This was such a meaningful episode. Cameron, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, John, you're so welcome. Thanks for reaching out and asking me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Cameron. If you would like to follow his content, I will post some of the links in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about him, just visit his website, CameronHerold.com. He has 5 really awesome books, and one in particular I ordered right away personally. His book, Free PR, looked extremely interesting, and I can't wait to read it. And as entrepreneurs, obviously trying to build a company, getting all the free PR you can is important, especially if it's free. Now, by the way, if you get a minute, please give the podcast a good rating and review. Look, guys, I know it's not convenient always to take the time to do that. And Lord knows when I get asked to leave reviews for things like Airbnb and Uber, I roll my eyes and I hesitate, but it would really mean a lot, and your feedback will help me better develop the content for all of you guys. Well, guys, look, that's all for today. I will see you next week with another incredible episode, and until then, I want to share my favorite acronym with you guys, which is PUSH. Persist until something happens. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you guys with next episode.